Collecting Pokemon cards is a very easy process, though one thing that gets misunderstood is just how many small complexities and intricacies there are when buying cards and products. So that's why in this video, I want to go over the 5 biggest money pits to avoid when you start. The reality is when you begin collecting Pokemon, the world seems huge. And it is, because there's just so many different generations of cards. There's so much history and so many periods that people are nostalgic towards. The areas of collecting are so widespread. There's vintage collectibles, there's graded cards, sealed collecting, there's elite trainer boxes, Pokemon Center elite trainer boxes. So that's why it's so important where you spend your money. Now what's funny, and this is because Pokemon cards change so much, this video that I'm making right now probably wouldn't have been that useful if it was made a few years ago. And that's because Pokemon cards were somewhat pretty much more affordable than they are today. These days, the word affordable and Pokemon, you just can't put them in the same sentence. In fact, Pokemon cards have gone through such a big price increase that you're looking at pretty much paying double the price for a new booster box compared to what you were paying in 2024. So while learning the cards and the rarities and all that, that's important, but I'd actually say budgeting is the most important skill when you kind of start collecting. That's why the first absolute waste of money is chasing hype periods at their peak. Whether that be meme cards, new promos that come around and people think they're gonna get sold out straight away, new cards that came out of sets, old sets, you name it. Every month there's a new shiny toy that the community focuses on, and when that happens, it makes serious noise. And with that huge hype and momentum, prices start increasing. The absolute worst decision you can make in this hobby is acting on a hyped card or a hyped set and buying into it, especially during that high media spotlight period. The reason why this is so important that you avoid it is because if you actually look at a graph and track over any hyped card over a long period, you'll see very clearly that when the hype leaves, the prices start dropping down very quickly. It's a lesson that most people learn a little bit too late, and I think that everyone usually makes a mistake by buying into a hyped card, then they see it drop, and then that's how they learn the lesson. But what's really good is if you haven't done that and you're watching this video, you're just learning that lesson right now, where you don't need to buy into a card because it's so hyped and people just get so excited about it, and then you see it all drop in price later on because it doesn't have that same attention. So don't think that if a card is hyped now that it's going to stay there. And there are examples of cards that had price spikes and there was a big hype wave and then they kept going up. Moonbronze's an example of that. It was kind of sitting at 500 US, then out of nowhere spiked to 900 US, and then pretty much from $900, it just consistently rised in price, okay? That is an example of a card that did actually have a hype period. There was a lot of hype and momentum and it did stay. But that's one example I can give you off the top of my head. If I actually looked back and tracked all these cards, I don't know, there's hundreds that have gone down in price. Hundreds. There's too many to list. And there's illustration rare buyouts. There was certain buyouts from certain illustrators of certain Pokemon cards. There's Japanese female trainer cards. There's everything under the sun you can imagine when it comes to hype periods. And that's why it's very important that if you are buying these cards, you try to not actually do that. Actually just take this video as a lesson, because I think the easiest way to learn that is either you do it, you see the card drops in price and then you go, oh wow, I was a banana, and it's okay to be a banana. Everyone can be a banana, but the good thing is you can avoid that by just not overpaying. And obviously, as well, tracking your collections is good, and you do want to get in the habit of tracking your collectibles, because when you track your collection, especially over a long period of time, you can actually get a very detailed overview of how collectibles behave in the market. And if you are looking for an app to track your collection, then Collector is your go-to, who are actually the sponsors of today's video. Collector is a collectible portfolio tracker and manager. Now, if you do upgrade to Collector Pro, there's actually a bunch of benefits which make the app stand out even more. And one of them is the ability to scan cards with your phone's camera through the app, and it automatically adds it to your collection. Now, this is a very quick way to add cards to the app, and it's a massive time saver. Though personally, I love the Max tab, and that's where it really shines. The Max tab allows you to extend pricing data past the usual 1-year view. That means you can actually track a card or sealed product's performance over years. This is super useful if you love investing in collectibles and love seeing super detailed breakdowns. Now, also, if you do love other TCG, Collector also has a massive library of other cards to add, including One Piece, Lorcana, Dragon Ball, Yu-Gi-Oh, and many others. You can find the links to download the app in the video's description. A big thanks to Collector for always supporting the channel. Now let's jump back into the video. Now, the next thing to avoid is overpaying for PSA 10s with no long-term in demand, or buying a lot of lower grade cards because you think you're getting a deal. Collecting has changed a lot. Now we do have an era of a little bit of junk slabs, and it is probably not that good to say, though there is a lot of cards. If you are wanting to add them to your collection, sure, buy lower grades. If you do care about price growth, usually it's much better to buy the PSA 10 over the PSA 9 or the PSA 8. You will see people say, oh, but if you bought the PSA 9, oh, it was actually a better decision in the long term because look how much the PSA 9 rised, and then if you look at the PSA 10, and it didn't have that same kind of price growth. These are cherry pick things. If you just look at it over a broad scale, the chance of you picking a PSA 9 card to outperform a PSA 10 in terms of percentage growth is so rare. It's pretty much, there's only a few cards that can do that. That's why PSA 10s, usually it's more how they multiply when they rise, and that's the kind of key with a PSA 10's growth versus a PSA 9's growth can be a very different trajectory in how much it multiplies when it starts rising. And that's the key with PSA 10s. That's why people say, hey, buy PSA 10 copies, because if you look at history, when they start rising in price and when a card starts getting super expensive, the PSA 10 copy multiplies in a way that the PSA 9 does not really do. The PSA 9 usually stays pretty close to that price of a raw card, unless it's a very old vintage card, then it's a different story. But if you're talking about a modern card, usually PSA 9s and modern are usually head to head in terms of pricing. In fact, lately, sometimes raw cards are even more expensive than PSA 9s. That's actually been happening lately. But that's why there's a big focus on buying PSA 10s. And you really shouldn't just be buying these lower grade cards because you think, oh, they're a great investment. Because what you're kind of missing from that whole equation is the multiplying effect of PSA 10s if they do start increasing in price. Though one thing that you really also need to consider is buying slabs and cards that don't have a big market for them that you think will rise in price. It is very different if you're buying a PSA 10 or any kind of card that you want in your collection. It's a really cool illustration rare that you love. You know, the Evaltile illustration rare. You just absolutely love it. You want it in your collection. You love the artwork. You buy it in PSA 10. It's something in your collection. That is great. Great decision. But if you are buying that and you say, hey, I'm buying this because I'm going to make profit and it's going to grow in price, that's why just have that kind of overview when you're buying these cards. Don't just buy any kind of slab that you see. And also, please don't buy from non-reputable grading companies. That's a big mistake a lot of newcomers make. They see a PSA 10 copy of a card and then they see a no-name grading company have a 10 and they say, hey, I'm going to buy the no-name grading company. It's the same card. Though when you are buying a graded card from a reputable company like PSA, like BGS, like CGC, their name holds a lot of weight in the market. They have the reputation. These no names or new grading companies, sure, they may get there and they may eventually get to that level, but at this point in time, it is a big money pit to just be spending money like that. Now, number 3 is not thinking with the end in mind and ignoring liquidity. This is a big thing, and it all comes down to how people search for collectibles and how people recognize them in the market and a lot of these things. If you look at a lot of sets, there's a lot of things. There's booster boxes, there's elite trainer boxes, there's premium collection boxes, there's build and battle boxes, it goes on and on. The amount of promo and ancillary products that are available, the list is pretty much endless in terms of that. What you really want to do is you do want to think in the end in mind, meaning if you buy a sealed product and you want to one day sell it, or you hope that it rises in price, you want to kind of tailor your purchase in a way that has the best liquidity in mind. And how do you think of that? Well, if you're buying a booster box or you're buying an elite trainer box, they're great because if people search that on eBay, they're very recognizable. So they're very easy. People want to collect ETBs. To have that, people want to actually collect booster boxes. Booster boxes are a primary sealed collectible. People love them, adding them to collections. But if you're buying maybe like build and battle boxes or these ancillary products or these special promo collection boxes, sure, they may rise in price, but they may not rise the same way as an elite trainer box or a booster box. Or what's even more important is they may not be as easy to sell. A booster box or elite trainer box are going to be far more easy to sell than a special promo box. So that's why you do need to think, if you are buying these and you do want to sell them later down the line, probably try think with the end in mind rather than thinking about buying some wacky kind of out there thing. Even though you might get it for a good price, when it comes to selling it, it can be a little bit difficult. And also sometimes those promo boxes, sure, they can be great, but also sometimes a lot of the plastic and the packaging, the cardboard, it's actually in the shape of a Pokemon. So they can actually get easily damaged, like just the box. And if you do collect sealed, you know how it works. It just works like cards. If the sealed box is damaged or if there's a lot of damage on the box, that already starts decreasing the final sale price later down the line. Now, the next thing that can be potentially a big waste of money is trying to focus on building a very big collection rather than a high-priced liquid collection. This is pretty common. When people start collecting, they want a lot, and they think that more means better. It's this kind of thing that having more to show off means that you have a better collection than a lot of people, but that's where you can kind of make a mistake. I always find it's much better to have a high-priced liquid collection. That would be a better way to kind of tailor your purchases for your collectibles. If you are buying just a lot of singles and all that just to have a big collection to show off for the sake of it, that can be a bit of a money trap as well, because number one, selling that later down the line can be a little bit of an issue. The point I'm trying to make is if you do want a card, and like same point as thinking of that liquidity, you want to do that as well. And that means, having those PSA 10 slabs or thinking about how you want to tailor your purchases to sell them later down the line. And there's a lot of cards like that. You can see the most iconic cards from Generations. They've got big markets available for them. And of course, you got to also remember when people remember eras or when people look back at eras, they usually remember the big moments. And that's not just for Pokemon. That's actually true in life. And there's actually a lot of even research for the brain that we remember the emotional moments, the big moments. The rarer cards or the more underneath cards that aren't really that seen, they're not as remembered as those big moments. So the bigger cards, the more memorable cards also have a bigger audience and a bigger market available later down the line if you do choose to sell. So it is something to keep in mind. Also, I just want to say, if you have been enjoying the video, these videos do take quite a long time to make and a lot of research. It would be awesome to have you subscribe to the channel for consistent Pokemon collecting and Pokemon market updates. Now, number 5, a big way to waste money is collecting without any goals or not having any time horizon when buying product. Having goals is a fundamental for this hobby, and if there's one key takeaway you can take from this video, it is about creating goals when you collect. That is essential, because when you make a goal, you essentially have an end point where you know where to stop. One problem is if you're just collecting and you just want to buy every chase card, any card that you see, any PSA 10 card that you see, oh, that's amazing, that sealed product's amazing. You are just going to be spending a lot of money, and you could be buying a lot of junk, and you could also have a problem that if you do care about selling it later down the line, you've just been spending money on a lot of crap. One thing, and why you shouldn't really worry about Pokemon, even if it's in a lull period, or even if the market goes quiet, or even if the market's booming, one thing about Pokemon cards, and they have been proven throughout history, is that people they don't really quit. No one really it's like RuneScape. Have you heard that? No one quits RuneScape. You just take a big break. It's kind of like collecting as well. People take breaks from collecting, but they always revisit. They're always keen to see what's happening, and then they just pick up where they left off. So they'll see, they were collecting during Sword and Shield. They could see all those cards were booming. They added those to their collections. They never sold them. They kept it. They take a big break, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Then they go look. They look at the market. They go, wow, what's happened? Oh, well, and then they start looking at newer sets. They get back into the hobby, and then a few years down the line, they leave the hobby again. Then they revisit. That's kind of how the hobby works. It does have that momentum where people come, they get excited, they check it out, then they leave for a little bit, then they come, and yeah, like it's so important. Like, it's like RuneScape, man. Like RuneScape, I always say, hey, I quit RuneScape, but then something happens, a new skill gets released, something happens, and then I'm back playing again, and I'm chopping trees again, and my wife's like, why are you playing this game? Like, you've got your PS5 Pro, the graphics are amazing. Why are you playing RuneScape? It's like, dude. This is just leave me alone. But that's usually how it works. And collectibles are very similar like that as well, right? People will come, people will leave, and that's just how the hobby works. So it is important that, you do want to make sure that you have those goals in collecting, because it does allow you to have that break point when needed. And of course, you can revisit it and pick it back up whenever you please. But, spending money and learning how to collect go hand in hand. Though if you are looking for the best money tips when it comes to collecting, I do actually speak about that in this video on screen here. Within this video on screen, I go deep into how to collect on a budget and save money. Click the video that's appearing on screen right now. You can watch that video. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next video.